What's up everyone, and thank you for stopping by the channel. Today's project is this Chalmers tiller, and the problem is it's been sitting outside in the weather and I don't know if it works anymore. Let's take a good look at it, find out what's wrong with it, and hopefully we can fix it. In this video, we try and repair this tiller. However, it may not be the exact repair you need to make to yours. We'll explore other options later in the video. The first time I saw this tiller, it was quite obvious that it was decades old, but I wasn't sure how many. After searching the frame for more information, I found the build sticker, which is still in great shape, and it says it was built in 1962, so this thing is almost 60 years old. However, the original engine is long gone, and in its place is an overseas Honda clone, so more than likely the original engine was either worn out or beyond repair, so replacing it must have been the best option. Unfortunately, it was left outside in the weather, and now we need to see if we can get it running again. I will say this about older equipment, these things were built to last. Even though there's some surface rust in a few places on the frame, the metal is quite thick and it's still very solid. The first thing I want to do is to check to make sure that the engine is in good condition. Now the build sticker on it says it's a 2008 model, but I don't think it has a lot of time on it. I then remove the dipstick to inspect the oil, and there's plenty of oil in it, and for once it looks to be fresh, so I don't plan on changing it. The next place I want to look is the gas tank, and after taking off the filter screen, we can see that the tank is empty. Now it does have some light surface rust on it, but it's not that bad at all. Now the plug wire looks to be in terrible condition, so I want to check to make sure that the spark plug is getting spark. The easiest way for me to do that is to use a spark checker. You can find these online for just a few dollars, and to use it, just install it in line with the spark plug, make sure the kill switch is in the on position, then pull the rope a few times while watching for an orange glow in the tester. Now you don't have to use a spark checker, you could just remove the spark plug from the engine, reconnect the spark plug wire, and then ground the body of the plug to the metal on the engine. As you just saw, there was an orange glow in the tester, so that means we do have a working ignition system. Now while pulling the rope, I did notice that the engine was fighting back quite a bit, so I don't think it's worn out. The other thing that I noticed was that the rope wasn't completely returning back into the recoil. Now this wouldn't be a big deal, except we don't want it to get caught up in the tines, so we'll have to do something about it later on. The next thing I want to do is remove the air filter so we can put some gas into the carb's throat for a test run. Another reason why I don't think there's a lot of time on this engine is that the air filter looks to be the original one and absolutely spotless with hardly any dirt on it. Fortunately, the engine started and ran for a few seconds, which is great news. Next, I want to take off the carb for an inspection. Now, if yours doesn't start, try using starting fluid instead of gasoline, and if that doesn't work, try replacing your spark plug. Some people ask me why I don't just put gas in the tank and try starting a piece of equipment. The answer is that most of the time these machines are put away improperly and the fuel system then needs to be inspected and cleaned. If I put gas in the tank and it doesn't start, then I have to drain the tank and the bowl on the carb, which is just a hassle and I don't want to deal with it. Now if I take the fuel system apart and everything's good with it, then at least I know what condition it's in before I make a mess by adding gas to the fuel system. After removing the bowl nut and the bowl, I'm surprised to see it's actually in good condition. Also, the float is moving smoothly like it should, and the needle seems to be free as well. I think this might have been put away with little to no gas in the tank, which saved it from the normal issues we would see when the machine is neglected for a long period of time. After removing the needle and float, I noticed something strange with the fuel jet. If I change the brightness, you can see that the screwdriver slot is a bit mangled. Someone's been in here and has damaged the jet. That's probably also the reason why it's so clean in the carb as well. Now I have to be extra careful when taking off this jet. Make sure you use a screwdriver that's as wide as the jet, and while turning the screwdriver, press hard against it so your chances of damaging the jet are reduced. Not only was the jet damaged, but somebody's over-tightened it as well. So here's the jet, and as you can see, someone used the wrong size screwdriver on it. Now I don't have plans on replacing this jet or even cleaning up the slot. Instead, we'll just have to be careful installing it from now on. We can also see that the hole in the middle, which is supposed to be clear, is blocked, so we'll have to use a small wire to clear it. This blockage would keep gas from getting to the engine and not letting it start. After pushing a wire through the jet, it's now clear. If you don't want to use a piece of wire, use whatever method you want to clear it. Next, I want to remove the emulsion tube that's located right above where the jet was and check to make sure that's clean. To get it out, just reach through the opening of the carb and push down on the brass piece that's at the bottom of the opening. So it looks to be covered in old varnish gas, and some of the holes are smaller than they're supposed to be. To clean it, I'll just use a wire brush to remove the varnish and then use the same wire as before to clear the holes. After all the holes have been cleared of any debris, I'll spray some carb cleaner through it. One of the interesting things about this carb is that it has a sediment bowl. That way, any heavy debris from the fuel tank will be caught in it. That means we need to remove it and clean out anything that might be in it. Now, I don't see any debris in it, just more old varnish gas. To remove it, I'll just spray some carb cleaner in it, then agitate it, and that should loosen up the varnish. Then I'll just wipe it clean. Now, after cleaning, it looks a lot better, although since there wasn't any loose debris in it, I don't think it would have mattered too much if we cleaned it or not, but since we were here, it didn't hurt either. The last thing to check and clean is a jet that's located right below the idle screw. Before removing the screw, count how many turns it takes to bottom it out, then we can remove it. When reinstalling the screw, we'll just count the same number of turns from the bottom as we counted earlier. Now, to remove the jet, just pry up on the edges and it should come loose. I've never seen anybody break one of these before, but I would still be careful when doing this. Now, once it's loose, take a look through the bottom of the jet. Now, this jet only deals with air and not gas, so the hole is tiny. The only way to clear this jet is to use a micro drill bit set. You can find these online for about $15. I would just pick one of the smallest drill bits and push it through the jet. Then I would go to the next size till you can't go through anymore. That way you'll know that the jet is clear. I wouldn't try upsizing the hole as the drill bit can break off in the jet. So I've paused the video to show you the debris that was stuck in the jet. If the jet was clogged, the engine would surge, revving up and down. Now if that happens to you, that could be the reason for it. Now since the first drill bit went through, I used the next size up and that fit as well. However, the next size didn't fit, so I stopped right there. Now after the jet has been cleared, I'm going to spray the needle seat area and the top of the sediment bowl to make sure that the passage is clear. Once that's done, I'll then start putting the carburetor back together again. Now, if you think a carburetor is just too far gone because of the amount of varnish that's covering it or the amount of debris or corrosion in it, I would definitely consider replacing the carb instead of trying to clean it. I don't always clean every carburetor I come across, and I have made a few hard decisions to replace them instead of spending an hour cleaning a badly neglected carb. I just find it a better use of my time going with the option with the highest chance of success. The other thing to consider is a limited budget and possibly a deadline. Now, since this carburetor wasn't that bad, I decided to spend 15 minutes to clean it. We'll see here in a little bit if that investment pays off. The last thing I want to fix is the recoil that seems to be a bit slow when retracting the rope. The most likely reason could be a spring that needs lubrication. Now, after getting the recoil assembly off the engine, I'll spray some lubricant where the spring is located, then work the recoil and see if it improves. After spraying some lube on the spring, it seems to be working a lot better. The other option would have been to put one more turn on the spring. Now with the recoil off the engine, I want to use my compression tester to see how healthy this engine actually is. You can find these online for less than $20, and to use it, install it in the spark plug hole, and since the recoil is off, I'll use a drill to turn the engine over. The tester will measure how much pressure your engine can make on the compression stroke. We want to see a reading well over 100 psi, and the higher the better. The number I want to see is something close to 150. So the reading is 170 psi, and that means that this engine is extremely healthy. If we had gotten a reading below 100, then it would mean that this engine has some serious wear on it. This is, of course, using a drill to turn the engine over, which will bypass the compression release and give us an accurate compression reading. Next, I want to put the recoil assembly back on and do the same test again. We should see a lower reading because the compression release should be working this time. So the reading is about 65 psi, which is a lot lower than before, but it makes it a lot easier to pull the engine over. I also noticed that this engine has a very generic brand spark plug in it. Now this brand has been known to fail quite soon versus its competition, so I want to test it to make sure that it works. At the same time, I'll be comparing it to a new name brand plug. So it seems to be working quite well even when compared to a better brand. The reason is that this engine does not have a lot of runtime on it. If this plug had a lot more hours on it, I think its performance might be a lot worse than the name brand plug, and that's assuming that it lasts that long. Remember, this generic plug isn't bad because of performance, it's bad because of a long-term reliability issue. Now, since all the testing is done, we can now reinstall the carb back onto the engine, put some gas in it, and then try starting it. Another reason why this engine would have a starting or running issue is that the fuel tank has so much rust in it that the rust would make its way towards the carburetor, fill up the sediment bowl, and eventually clog the carb. To keep this from happening, it's suggested to keep a full tank of gas and to run the machine routinely to keep the gas fresh. But what do you want to do if you want to put the machine away for long-term storage? If that is the case, I would empty the fuel tank and then fog the tank and combustion chamber with fogging oil, which is supposed to keep surfaces from developing rust and corrosion during storage. I'm sure there are different ways to keep the tank from rusting, but this is the way I prefer. Now, to find this product, just search fogging oil on a search engine, and you should find plenty online or at your local auto parts store. So I didn't have the choke fully closed for the first couple of pulls, but after that it started right up. It seems to run fine, and the tines seem to work like they should. Now, when I want to turn the engine off and I'm not sure when I'm going to use it next, I usually turn off the fuel valve so the carburetor will be empty of gas. This will keep the gas from turning into varnish inside the carb and possibly clogging up the fuel jet again. However, if you're just stopping the machine for a few minutes, I would just use the kill switch to turn it off. So it looks like the time spent outside in the elements didn't cause any serious issues with the engine. In the future, I would suggest at least putting the tiller under some sort of cover to keep it from getting rained on, like a carport. So my question is, how would you store this tiller outside? Would you cover it up with a tarp or just leave it uncovered? I've heard arguments for both cases, and I was curious what your thoughts were. Personally, I would cover it with a piece of wood across the handlebars to the engine. Now, this would keep the water off of it along with some sunlight. At the same time, it would give the engine airspace to let it dry if it did get some water on it. Thank you for watching. I really appreciate your time here. Please feel free to ask me any questions, and I hope to see you in the next video.